guys? Smooth Terrorist in the motherfucking house. You know, sometimes, most of the time, I turn on the camera knowing what kind of video I'm gonna make. I don't script them, but I usually at least have a general outline in my head of what I want to say. And this is not one of those videos. I don't know what we're gonna get this time, guys. Freestyle video. It might end up being a gem, it might end up being a complete turd. I got a comment on one of my videos lately that kind of stuck with me, because it's one that I've gotten so many times, where the person, and I wish I could have found it, but it's been buried and I can't remember which video it was on, and I looked for it so I could read it verbatim, but I get a lot of fucking video comments, because I don't ban anybody and I don't censor comments. It's a thriving intellectual marketplace. I love it. Anyway, but this person said, he basically said, I used to think that you were an idiot. I've been watching your videos for a long time, and I used to think you were stupid as fuck. And then over the years, all these things that you predicted have been coming true. And now I'm frankly terrified. And, you know, it's funny how often I get that exact same comment. Including, like, I used to think you were such a retard. Like, I seem to get one of those every few days. And, you know, it's not like I'm not a self-aware person. I can certainly understand why it would be terrifying to think that a guy like me is the prophet who's seen the handwriting on the wall, because I am a guy who gets drunk and waves guns around and accepts boxing challenges, like I'm oo-ball or something, you know. So I can certainly understand that. And, you know, I guess what I want to say to people like that is that I'm terrified too. I'm just as scared as you are. And if it's any consolation to you, you know, when we're all sitting around in concentration camps or the smoldering wreckage of a nuclear apocalypse, for example, I'm not going to get any joy out of saying I told you so. I'm not going to be sitting around acting shitty about it. Like, why didn't you listen, guys? I mean, what would be the point? So I've got another private message here by the same person that I read a private message from last time, Wishless. What does Wishless have to say? Wishless says, I don't consider Al Jazeera alternative either. Not beyond alternative to the mainstream American media. That's what made me curious about your other news sources to begin with. I thought I said as much in my message, but I guess my tongue slipped. Your criticism was not at all pedantic. It's important to elucidate the terms of our discourse, especially since as extremists, meaning people whose ideologies sit outside of the mainstream discourse, we suffer as a result of language. It can't be avoided when by its very nature language is the language of the masses. Actually, it wasn't just the 50 I had to laugh at the end of your previous video. I think that just a day ago you made your video about tribalism and collective identity. And in the very next, you say, it would make me feel better if my fellow Americans were armed. Obviously I understood what you meant, but it's just funny. And a great reminder of how easy it would be to misinterpret anything, especially if it's something that you don't seek to understand. And you know, once again, a big touche for this wishless person who provides some very fucking constructive criticism. And maybe I need to start. Maybe I need to stop referring to people as Americans. Maybe I need to start saying my fellow human beings who are trapped in this geological region that collectivists have labeled America. And you know, the point he makes a valid point which is a point that Noam Chomsky has made many times, which is that it's just hard to fucking talk in America. It's hard to talk. Am I really going to do that? Should I stop using the word American? Boy, would that make it difficult to communicate. Boy, would the fucking length of my videos go up. My average video is like half an hour long already. I'm a wordy motherfucker. I'm a windbag. And that's only going to get worse if I have to start worrying about shit like this. But, you know, this isn't the point, actually. I didn't read that private message to talk about language or the terms of political discourse in this geographical region. You know, the reason that I read that PM in the video is, how smart is this fucking wish list person? You know, I mean, I read this message and I was like, wow. And I've been feeling that way so much lately. Why am I doing this with my hands? I don't know. You know, like, I read comments by guys like Tirade Faction, and I just go, wow. Like, and you know, and Severo left the comment a while back that said your videos are doing something important, even if nothing changes, because it just makes me feel. And by the way, N Severo I think is actually Math is Money, so for anyone interested, you know, it just makes me feel better about life, that there's someone else who sees the same things I see. That street really runs both ways, guys. But instead of just feeling warm and fuzzy, that I've found some like-minded individuals out there, I think maybe it's time to do something with this. Maybe it's time to push things forward. You know, guys, I'm gonna make a little bit of a confession here. Ever since a young age, and throughout my entire life, I've felt like it's my personal responsibility to save the world. I've felt like it's my personal responsibility to save mankind from destruction. And I wonder pretty often what that says about me. I'm sure it doesn't say something good. I'm sure I probably have some kind of Jesus complex or some kind of megalomaniacal personality disorder. I probably do. But we've all heard the saying that just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. Well, by the same turn, just because I'm a megalomaniac does not mean that the human species does not require saving. Pardon me. We seem to be on a collision course with destruction, and I want to tell you guys some little quotes and facts and anecdotes that are pertinent to this topic, some of which I've mentioned in my videos before, but I know that was years ago, and now I've got a whole new audience, whole new theme, whole new look, everything. There was a scientist named Drake who came up with an equation based on the amount of materials observable in the observable universe that would be required for life to come about. So things like carbon, for example, like how much carbon is there, and you know, he extrapolated the data and figured out, well, it's almost impossible for there not to be extraterrestrial life. It's pretty much a foregone conclusion that there is, and that's called the Drake equation. Pretty famous in science. A lot of people in the mainstream culture haven't heard about it, but anybody who's interested in science, you probably heard about this already. Now, Enrico Fermi, the famous physicist, Fermilab is named after him. He proposed something which, you know, and everything in science has to have a fancy name, so they called it the Fermi paradox. I think that's overly I think that's too fancy of a name for such a simple observation. Enrico Fermi basically said, well, if there's life everywhere, then how come we're not being visited by extraterrestrials all the time? And that got Carl Sagan thinking. And he proposed, in which, once again, it has a flowery, overly ceremonial, I guess, name for it, the Sagan resolution. The Sagan resolution to the Fermi paradox is that civilizations, when they reach a certain level of technological advancement, tend to self-destruct rather quickly. And that realization had such a profound effect on Carl Sagan that he began protesting nuclear sites. He began going to missile silos and chaining himself to the silo and protesting. But I gotta disagree with Sagan on one point. It's not the technological advancement that destroys a civilization. It's money! It's money! Why can't you fucking people see this? Look, it's so simple. And I got a lot of disagreement in the comments section. Some people just didn't get it. So let me give you a simple equation that you can repeat like a prayer as many times as you have to until you get it, until it sinks in. Money equals debt. Debt equals slavery. Money equals debt. Debt equals slavery. Just repeat that to yourself a few fucking million times and until it sinks in. I mean, really, you know, I remember a few months ago, I was looking at some old memorabilia, let's say, from the days of American slavery, such as the newspaper ads that they used to sell slaves with. And I don't know if you guys have ever looked at stuff like that. Like, they would place ads in newspapers, like, we're having a slave auction today. Come early to get the best prices. You pay this much for a man, this much a woman. And you know, maybe you're asking yourself, why was I looking at stuff like that? I just look at stuff like that, guys. I think it's fucked up. I'm kind of obsessed with the whole topic of slavery and money. It's always something I've found incredibly fascinating and disturbing. And I came across something interesting when I was looking at this stuff. And what I came across, and you know, here again, I wish I had the ability to splice pictures into my videos. I don't. So you guys are just going to have to deal with a description of what I saw, unless you want to go and look it up for yourself. I'm sure you can find it. Back in the day, back in the slavery days, banks would often print their own money. That is to say, it wasn't just one big central banking system like the Federal Reserve that we have now, where all the money looks the same. Little regional banks would print their own money, and these bills would be, I mean, they look like modern money. You know, the bills kind of look the same. But I was looking at some banknotes from the slave states, and a lot of these banknotes depicted images of slavery. Like, on the back of the bill, like, let's say it's like a $10 bill, right? And you turn it, and on the back of the bill, there's a picture of African people picking cotton, harvesting the cotton. They got baskets in their hands. They're, you know, and these pictures were very idealized and romanticized. They had that Norman Rockwell Soviet-era propaganda poster feel, where everything looks so nice and happy, and the slaves have a smile on their face, and they look like they're happy doing their work. The slaves are happy-go-lucky slaves, picking the cotton, plowing the field, you know, shining the master's boots. I don't think there were actually any bills that depicted that, but you get my point. But there were a lot of these. And that got me thinking, when I was looking at those bills, it got me thinking that was a more honest time back then. And it made me wonder what the currency of today would look like if we were as honest now as we were back then. Would a $20 bill have a picture of like Chinese sweatshop kids on the back of it? Would a $5 bill have a picture of like people at McDonald's flipping burgers? You know, would we get to see the slaves of the current economy on the money, the way the slaves back in the day were actually on the money? And I never saw anything that more clearly and directly illustrated the connection between money and slavery as that. I mean, here we have money, here we have actual banknotes, actual bills, with pictures of slavery on the bill. On the bill. And, you know, like I said, those were more honest times. You know, it's the slavery has been hidden now, but money is still slavery. Money is slavery. Boy, I'm off on a tangent. I can't even remember what I was talking about before I started going off on this rant. But you know, when I talked about that a few videos ago, a few people in the comments section, they were on board, and a few people didn't get it. A few people were like, could you elucidate a little bit more about why you think money is slavery? Because I think we can have money without having slaves. And those are what I think of as the not incorrigible perhaps, but those are the slow students in the class. You know, I'm gonna work on you guys. I'll be making more videos about that topic, but not this one. Not this one right here. But there's a few other facts that I want to talk about here. Let's talk about thermonuclear annihilation really quick. Let's talk about that. Albert Einstein. Perhaps a few of you guys have heard of him. You familiar with his work? Albert Einstein. He once said, and I'm going to butcher this quote, I'm sure, but it's going to be as close as I can get. He once said that I know not with which weapons World War III will be fought, but I can tell you that World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb, was once asked, I believe he was asked by a member of Congress, what it would take to prevent a nuclear catastrophe from happening in the United States. And his answer was, it would take a screwdriver. Because you will have to go into every shipping container in every port, and you're going to have to literally pry open every box, every crate that comes in on every shipping container and check for bombs. The physicist Richard Feynman, he's somebody else who worked along with Oppenheimer on the Manhattan Project. I remember Richard Feynman saying that after his work in the Manhattan Project, he fell into a deep depression that lasted for months. And that every time he was driving around and he would drive past a construction site and he would see construction workers erecting a new building, he would get this really dark, ironic sense of humor about it. He would kind of laugh, and he would say, these poor fools, why are they bothering to build anything? Because pretty soon we're all going to be dead. This is all going to be gone. I think I'm perpetually in that state. I think Richard Feynman got over that after a few months, and I never did for some reason. But I think that I used to believe I was a breed apart. I think I used to believe that I was the only person who could see the full picture of what was wrong. And after my video, The Perils of Tribalism, and the comment section that I got to read, and the private messages that people sent me, I've learned something. I'm not the only one who sees what's wrong and what needs to be done. There are other people like me. I'm not unique. There are people who recognize that the combination of thermonuclear weapons and ideas of national identity, of ethnic pride, tribalism, in other words, that those two things are a dangerous, not a dangerous mix, because it's not danger. We're talking about certain destruction on a long enough time scale. Probably not that long. We're talking about the longer we go with that combination, the more the likelihood of the destruction of our species approaches 1. It's a certainty. It's a statistical certainty. It has to occur if nothing changes. And you know, I noticed that there were some anti-natalists in the comments section of that video. In other words, people who think that life just sucks and we all need to die. Life is a horror show, and it'll be a good thing when the species is destroyed. And you know, I don't understand why you guys don't commit suicide, and I'm not telling you to do it. I am not telling you to do it. Please don't do it. But I don't understand why you don't. If you really believe what you say that you believe. And you know, I think what bothers me the most about you guys is you probably think you're real smart, and you probably think you're real unique, and you aren't. Every fucking Christian thinks the same way you guys do. They're all just praying for the apocalypse to happen. They can't wait for the judgment day. They can't wait for that shit. You know, we can't have a year with a round number without people gleefully anticipating the apocalypse. You know, the year 2000, and that was just fuck the year 2000. People were saying the same shit when the year 1000 rolled around. You know, this is nothing new, okay? Your opinion is not so revolutionary. It's not so groundbreaking. There's actually nothing new about it. And to the anti-natalists, including Doug Stanhope, who I'm a fan of, but you know, if he's watching, this goes for you too, Doug. You're fucking pussies. You're a fucking pussy. Suck it the fuck up. You know, and I'm not telling you to kill yourself, because if you're an anti-natalist, chances are you're probably smarter than the average person, and we don't need to lose any intelligent people. You know, the world needs every one of those we can get, but like, what the fuck is wrong with you guys? Really? You didn't get enough hugs when you were a kid or something? Life is so horrible. You know, you're praying for the destruction of the species. Really? You want me to give you a reason? You know, I'm not going to go all philosophical like Albert Camus here, and give you the Sisyphus argument. You want a reason to live? How about this? How about curiosity, guys? How about that? We haven't scratched the surface of understanding the natural world and the universe. We haven't even begun. And we're on the cusp of something so exciting and so mind-boggling. CERN has pretty much discovered the Higgs boson. It's not necessarily, I mean, it's not 100%. It's not like they actually found a Higgs, but they found something the right mass to be a Higgs, behaving the way a Higgs is predicted to behave. So the chances of that being a coincidence are so fucking slim that it's pretty much a statistical foregone conclusion that the Higgs boson does exist. Well, what's the implication of that? The implication of that is that string theory and supersymmetry are correct. And there is a theoretical physicist named James Gates, who, by the way, is a black guy, Confederal socialist, aka fringe elements. And he's a genius, which I'm just saying, you know, so your little theory about black people being less intelligent or whatever, like, you know, shove it up your ass. And James Gates, in the University of Maryland, has actually discovered a binary computer code within the equations of supersymmetry, complete with an error protection script. Now, what does that imply? Does that imply that we're actually living in a matrix? That reality itself is a computer simulation? Does it have implications that have to do with intelligent design? Frankly, who fucking knows? It doesn't necessarily imply intelligent design. We know that complex systems can arise through natural processes such as DNA. But the implications of this are just staggering. They're just fucking amazing. They boggle the imagination. And you want to die? You want the species to just collapse? You want us to go extinct? Guys, your anti-natalism, really? Really? What about everything that we haven't explored yet? What about the ice moon Europa? You know, sometimes I just think about what could be swimming around in those subterranean oceans. Don't you guys want to know? Aren't you guys curious? You know, and I would make the argument that while it's likely that extraterrestrial life exists elsewhere in the universe, we haven't observed that yet, so it's possible that life is unique to this planet. I don't think it's likely, but it's possible. And I would make the argument that, well, don't we have sort of a responsibility to spread this out to other parts of the universe? But of course the anti-natalist would say, what's the point? Oh, what's the point? You're going to die anyway. Oh, what's the point? You're going to get about 70 or 80 years old and just die anyway, so you might as well just not do anything. Well, guys, if you really think that way, I just can't understand why you haven't killed yourself. I just can't understand it. And once again, I'm not telling you to do it, please don't. But I can't understand where you guys are coming from. Your philosophy makes no sense to me. I think it's the most cowardly, self-piteous, pussy shit that I've ever fucking heard. And that's all I have to say about that. As Forrest Gump would say. that's my last word on anti-natalism. So please, I'm not saying keep it out of my comments. Hey, free speech like a motherfucker, but you know, please be aware that I'm rolling my eyes when I read that shit. I'm just, oh god, it's another one of these fucking people. You know, I don't get it. I really don't get it, guys. I don't at all. There's plenty that's wrong with life. Yeah, I agree with that. Nature is red in tooth and claw. It's a scary fucking existential reality that we all face. But you know what? Don't be a pussy. There are so many fascinating mysteries in life that we've just begun to scratch the surface of, and you guys want to call it quits. You guys want to fucking call it quits now. Just when things are starting to get so interesting. This is when you want to call it quits? After thousands of years of scientific progress and discovery and social progress, this is when you guys want to call it quits. I can't believe it. I just can't believe it. But I want to get back to the central premise of this video, if it even has one. That this is the most meandering fucking video I've ever made, and I knew it was going to be like this because I didn't have a coherent topic in mind when I turned the camera on. Not really. Now that I know that there are other people like me, that there are other people who recognize the necessity of doing away with money, who recognize the necessity of doing away with nationhood, with ethnic identity, not ethnic differences. Whoa, guys, don't interpret it that way. Nobody's talking about genocide, just with the ideas of ethnic nationalism. Now that I know that there are other people who recognize that the species is on a collision course with destruction, that this has to occur. You know, to the people that said, you know, I've seen a lot of your predictions coming true, and it terrifies me, and I used to think you were just a drunken moron, and now I'm starting to see that you actually see something. Well, let me tell you what else I predict, guys. This thing called the United States is going off a cliff at a breakneck pace. And what's going to happen when it does? Well, first, the civil unrest caused by runaway inflation and food prices that are out of control. And that's going to lead to martial law and probably a dictatorship. Probably a full-spectrum dictatorship. Not like the tyranny we've got now, and we're living under some serious fucking tyranny, but I'm talking Nazi style. And what's going to happen then? You can guess it, war with the fucking Russians. Because a nation that's economically crippled and becomes very nationalist, very totalitarian, it's going to rely on war to sustain its continued existence. And we already rely on war, but we're going to rely more on that. We're going to start. Who knows? I mean, God, trying to predict what's going to happen is pretty difficult, but I could see us invading Canada to protect them from the threat of terrorism the same way. You know, that was actually Hitler's pretext when they invaded Poland. He said, we got to protect Poland from terrorists. I could see that happening. It's impossible for me to guess what the spark is going to be that sets off the powder keg. But all I know is that it seems to me like World War III might not be that far off. And now that I know there are people like me who recognize this, what I want to say to you guys is that you have a special responsibility by being somebody who recognizes these truths. There is a burden on you to do something about it. You know, I really think that we possess a special kind of knowledge. I was just talking about James Gates, that theoretical physicist at the University of Maryland who discovered the code in string theory. You know, that guy's a genius, no fucking doubt about it. But I'm willing to bet he votes for one of the main two parties. He probably votes Democrat or votes Republican. And it just goes to show that, you know, that shit Sam Harris said about the human mind being so compartmentalized that you can be educated enough to design a nuclear bomb yet still believe that you're going to get the 72 virgins in paradise. Well, that's some true fucking shit. And I think that people like us, people who recognize what's wrong politically and what needs to be done. We possess a specific kind of genius, which is necessary, which is needed, it's crucial. And I think that we're not pulling our weight. I think we're not doing enough with the understanding that we have. And I had an idea. The idea began with the realization that I'm just not smart enough to figure out the answers. I'm not. I don't have solutions. And the idea began to form, and I realized that, well, where do the best decisions come from? I think the best decisions come from collectives, not from individuals. As funny as that sounds for an individualist who despises collectivism like me, I do think that the best decisions come. Look at this. Look at why does science work so well? Nobody can fucking deny that it works. It's precisely because science is anarchy. It's the peer review process. You know, let's say that instead of peer review, there was one centralized body which made all the decisions. Like, let's say it's the Royal Society in England, or the National Academy of Sciences here in the U.S. Let's say that everybody who makes a discovery has to submit their papers to them, and they decide what goes and what doesn't go. Think about how much that would stifle progress, and think about how much the gears of science would grind to a halt if it was subjected to that kind of hierarchical, top-down structure. I was watching a lecture by Freeman Dyson at Boston University, and Freeman Dyson, the title of his lecture was something along the lines of heresy in science, or the heretical. I can't. It was something about, like, basically his premise was we need more heretics in science. And an example that he used of this was a scientist he knew who theorized an alternate explanation for how petroleum is formed, that rather than being formed by organic material, it's actually it has an abiotic genesis, I suppose you would say, that it's actually formed deep in the mantle, and it's formed from non-organic materials. Now, this person's theory was ignored, and the reason that the theory was ignored, according to Freeman Dyson, is because the person did not have a degree in geology. In other words, they didn't have a piece of paper. They didn't have letters after their name. But then years later, I think he said it was actually 30 years later, research was conducted which proved, well, not proved, but lent significant credence to that theory. I think they were able to form methane by subjecting the same materials found in the mantle of the Earth to the same temperatures and pressures that are present there. And you know, what this goes to illustrate, what this goes to show, in my opinion, is that when science succeeds, it succeeds because of its lack of hierarchy. And when science fails, it fails precisely because of its degree of hierarchy, because of the hierarchy that is present, because of the phony conceptions of legitimacy, the phony ideas of there being reputable sources and sources which cannot be trusted, credible sources, and oh, well, if this guy doesn't have a degree, then we can't listen to what he's saying. You know, look at how long Einstein's theories took to gain acceptance because he started as a patent clerk. This is the kind of thing I'm talking about. And I think that the best decisions are made collectively and without hierarchy. I think, I'm probably somebody who is seen as having no faith at all in collectives, but I actually do. There are some collectives that I have a great amount of faith in, but only the collectives that don't have hierarchy. I have a great amount of faith in the collectors. Excuse me. I have a great amount of faith in the collectives that don't have dominance hierarchies, that don't have leadership. I think they tend to produce amazing results. I think they tend to produce answers. And what I'm thinking about right now is that I would like to participate in a think tank, which is not to say that I would like to lead a think tank. I don't want to lead anything. I would like to participate in a think tank of like-minded individuals who understand that thermonuclear weapons are incompatible with ideas of national identity, who understand that money is slavery. And I would like to pool resources and try to come up with some solutions. And perhaps the first order of business should be identifying more people who think the way that we do. But that decision isn't up to me to make. That decision should be made collectively. Now, where should this think tank take place? Well, I'm actually going to create a website called notdestructive.com, and if you would like to donate some money to me through PayPal, I'm kidding, guys. I'm joking. I don't know, but that's something that we should talk about in the comments section, and we should get this ball rolling, because the crucial thing to understand here, I think, is that most people, through some feat of insanity, have learned, just like Richard Feynman did, to cope with the looming threat of nuclear annihilation. This is the human species, guys. Let me use a visual aid. This is our species. This is us. Constantly, 24 hours a day. The doomsday clock is ticking. And I think people who have got their eye on politics and the economy, you can feel it ticking. You can hear it ticking. We're on a collision course with destruction. A full thermonuclear exchange would kick up enough sediment and dust up into the atmosphere to rival the asteroid that wiped out the dinosaurs. And I'm not saying it would wipe out all life on Earth. I'm not saying, I'm sure there are plenty of bacteria around thermal vents deep in the ocean that would survive just fine. But anything with a spine is dead. Higher forms of life, forget about it. It's like resetting the clock back to the fucking Cambrian period. We can't let this happen. And the crucial thing to understand is that nobody's gonna ride in on a white horse and save us from ourselves. It's up to people who understand to come up with a solution. And for anybody who mocks our effort, and I'm sure that they will, all I can say is that if you think it's insane to be concerned about this, if you think it's a sign of some kind of mental distress or personality disorder, to spend all of your time thinking about thermonuclear annihilation, all I have to say to those people, all I have to say to those critics is that I don't think it's a sign of mental health to be able to be well adjusted to an insane situation. And that's what you guys are. You're well adjusted and you're going happy-go-lucky about your day in an insane situation. That's not a sign of mental health. quite the opposite. So, bottom line is, if you feel the way I do about this topic, if you believe the things that I believe, I think it's time for us to come together and to start brainstorming solutions. And I think it's time to push this thing forward and to try to come up with some real answers, which I can't do on my own. I've spent most of my life thinking about this problem and thinking about how to solve it. And disarmament is not the answer. It just isn't. We're not going to disarm nukes for the same reason that we're not going to get rid of small arms, guns. It's game theory, guys. Just think about it. You can't disarm. You cannot disarm. But if you remove the motivations, then the nuclear bombs become the safest thing in the world. You know, the Soviets used nuclear bombs to put out oil well fires. They have legitimate uses. In fact, there are actually some very promising theoretical means of propulsion for space flight that NASA and other space agencies are not capable of exploring and developing because of nuclear test ban treaties. There's plenty of legitimate uses for nukes. We don't need to disarm. We don't need to get rid of nukes. We need to get rid of nationhood. We need to get rid of tribalism. We need to get rid of ethnic pride, religious identity. This is the problem that we must solve. And I believe with every fiber of my being that time is running out. That those of us who recognize the problem and have seen the handwriting on the wall, we have to try to solve this problem within our lifetimes. We have to come together and start brainstorming what the solution is. So that's my video. This is the video, guys. Very unusual one, I'm sure. I don't even know if I'm going to be able to upload something this long. I bet I've been talking for about an hour. It feels that way. This has been The Smooth Terrorist, and if you enjoyed this video, then download it, re-upload it, mirror it, parody it, make it your own. Because the doomsday, anti-natalist, tribalist, suicidal maniacs at Google cannot censor me unless you let them. Keep it smooth.